This is the stream that runs along in the front of the cottage. The cottage we're staying at is just down where that red brick shed is. You can't see it from this angle. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. Which you can probably tell by the state of me. I didn't sleep that well last night. There's nothing wrong with the beds or the cottage or anything. It's just the pillows were too soft for me. I always struggle sleeping away from home. I think we all do to a degree. And I'd probably settle into it after a few nights. Mark is still getting ready to go out. So I'm on an initial sortie and see what's happening. Hay-on-Wye is of course in Wales. It's in Powys. The very edge of it, the bit beyond where I'm staying, is in Herefordshire. So it's right on the border, but the main part of the town centre, is in Wales. Why am I making such an issue about this? Well, it still rankles even now, which is silly. But way back in the early 90s, when I was doing a fanzine with some friends in Bath, for the second issue, a fan wrote in and said that Hay was not in Wales, it was in Hereford, and that he was from Hereford. Because Graham Bray, who you've seen in my Grumpy Old Men video and Stunning SF collection, he had written an article about the first time we went to Hay together buying SF books, and had mentioned that it was in Wales. So, you know, national pride demands that the record is set straight. So last night we went to the pub, the Three Tons, and we had pizza and beer. Rather more beer than I was planning, which might partially explain my state this morning, where I kind of resemble a fossil really. Let's have a look in this fossil shop later on. Anyway, this is the pub which we went to. And I'm supposed to be meeting Alan, one of the subscribers to the channel, here later on today, which will be great. So there we go. There's actually a picture up in my bedroom at the cottage we're renting, which shows the street I've just turned off in a photograph from 1885, and it's remarkably unchanged. I'm heading down now toward the River Wye. And this is one of the main routes by which you tend to drive into Hay. This is Hay Bridge, the bridge over the River Wye, as opposed to the bridge over the River Kwai, which of course the novel was written by Pierre Boulle, who wrote Planet of the Apes, which is one of the first SF novels I read, and it's French as well. It's great. If you've never read it, you should, because none of the film versions are faithful. Because quite frankly, the book is actually unfilmable. If you filmed it literally, straight away the game would be given away. So the first adaptation particularly, the famous one, with Charlton Heston, you know, and the Empire State, that's actually a really good adaptation of it. So here's the way. Hay has really come on a lot. As you see, every time I go and film anywhere, I know I'm always complaining about this, there's always loads of noisy traffic, even in supposedly quiet locations. As I was saying, Hay has really come on in tourist terms in recent years. The festival started about 92, 93. I've been coming here for about 7 years before that. And of course the festival changed the town enormously. If you come here in the summer, there's sort of people kayaking and paddle boarding and stuff. And yeah, you used to get that stuff years ago, but you know, now it's completely different. But yeah, it's still a great sort of day or two out if you're a bibliophile. So I'm not going to go too far over the bridge. Out that way, towards the main road, which again leads to Hereford, there used to be a bookshop specialising in East European literature, which is no longer there, and that was one of Mark's things, and he's very big on Eastern Europe, so used to do that. But I'm going to head back into town now and just have a bit of a look around while things are still quiet, apart from the bloody traffic of course. I've talked a little bit recently, I've mentioned a couple of times the idea of the final library. And what is the final library? Well, I guess it's my way of summing up thinking about books and my future, as short as it will be as I'm getting older. You know, you do have to be realistic about these things, and I'm thinking about really getting to the point where I've acquired all I'd like to have for reading reasons and nostalgia reasons. And I mean specifically with SF here. I think I'd always continue to buy the odd book, particularly non-fiction. But I am trying to put sort of a end date in sight for, you know, buying of collectible books and SF. And really, I am going to stick with certain authors who I really revere until they're no longer around. And I think when those authors, and I'm not going to name them, when those people are gone and there's no more material extant, I think I'll probably stop buying SF altogether. That might be some time off yet. It might only be a few years. It's hard to say, none of us know. So the final library is moving towards a kind of, I guess, perfection of collection. And then when I think I've got to that stage, and when I retire and I stop buying stuff, because when I retire I don't want to go in a new bookshop that sells new books for at least 2 years. I want to leave it all behind and forget it and kind of rediscover the pleasure which I used to have of going in a new bookshop with new books. I want to rediscover that. I can only do that by putting a distance between myself and new books for quite some time. I think it'll take at least 2 years, maybe 5, but I think secondhand I'll continue to show an interest. But there will be fewer secondhand bookshops going forward, I think, which is why Hay's quite important, really. So I guess we'll get out there now. Trying to get away from the noisy roads. This is the Poetry Bookshop, which claims to be the only bookshop in the UK which is focused on poetry, and obviously lots of kids' poetry as well. So, apart from the romantics, a little bits and pieces, poetry's not really my jam. Though, as I've said before, there's a certain connection between new wave and modernist concrete poetry. Looks like there's a bit of an outdoor market thing going on today. So we'll just have a look up here. Just quite characterful, as you can see. You know, it is nice. But these sort of antique shops and gifty places have become more the thing, and the actual number of bookshops now is down to 13, even though there claims to be 24 or 25 on the leaflet. Clock Tower Books, general stock, yeah, some nice Folio Society stuff in the window. I tend not to like folios. I mean, I see them together, I think they're rather nice, but they have got very commercial and modernist recently. But not modernist, they've gone contemporary, and the style of illustrations they're using in that is very comic booky. I'm not sure if I like it really. So yes, we'll have a look in here later on. It was very impressive last time I went in, I must say. I liked it a lot. But yeah, you know, places like Goosey Ganders, you know, weren't the thing here years ago. You always had a few antique shops. There's a lot more twinky boutiques and things. Getting to Hay is quite difficult unless you drive, and it's quite a long way from anywhere. You know, this is not sort of motorways and stuff. There are A roads, but even if you live in the West Country like me, it's quite a long way. There's Addy Man. I'm going to be in there again later on. Had a quick chat with Derek yesterday. And here's Murder and Mayhem. I'm going to get in there as well later on, have a proper look. Bit of crime and horror. And how do they call this? Is this Lion Street? I can never remember. And down here, of course, you've got Richard Booth's, which used to be an absolute hole, you know. It was great, but it was dirty and dusty, but these days it's absolutely beautiful. So, yeah. Had a quick look in there yesterday, and we'll have a proper look later on. I got a bit overwhelmed there in Richard Booth's and confronted by thousands of SF paperbacks, mostly fairly low grade, all cheap, and you just think sometimes you have too much. It's too easy to keep buying things because they look interesting or because they're an author you haven't read, and you know, I'm not a completist, so I'm going to go look at some more quality stuff now in our demands, and perhaps that'll refresh me a bit. And you've got the Broad Street Book Centre, where I've sort of spent a lot of time over the years, and it's about 10 different dealers, lots of little sort of alcoves and stuff, and it's really spectacular. But now and again you will get a nice score in here, so we'll get in there later as well. So I'm going to head back out of town now towards the cottage. Something that is down this way beyond the cottage is the children's bookshop, where I haven't been for years. I do want to go in there because I think they've got a couple of Silverbergs which I want. Yes, Robert Silverberg. So I'm heading out of town now. I'm actually in England now. I've crossed the border, so I'm in the zone doing the Stalker thing, and I'm heading out to the children's bookshop, which is a few hundred yards in this direction. I've been there for years now. They supposedly have a couple of uncommon Silverbergs, so we shall see. Speaking of Stalker, I recently reread Zona by Jeff Dyer, who is kind of a novelist, essayist, cultural critic, written books on all sorts of things. He's very good. But Zona is a book about Stalker, and I've read it twice, and it's one of those books that it's good in some ways, but as my friend Mark pointed out, it doesn't have the sort of slow pace of Stalker. It's very discursive, and it's also one of those things where, even though he's a novelist and a writer, you can just tell he's never read the novel, and yet he loves the film, has watched it many times, but has never read the source novel, which in a writer I found really strange. And he insists on using the epithet sci-fi, which, you know, as you know, doesn't wash with yours truly. And he also admits to flicking through Solaris and skip reading it just to see if there's a certain line of dialogue in the film, and to see if it's also in the book. And when you think of the acclaim that Lem has always had, you know, for many decades, before the Strugatskys had Western acclaim, it's kind of a slapdash approach, and you get the feeling that it's very much the literary snobbery thing where, oh, you know, you can't have sci-fi, you know, with these exceptions to the rule, you know, as Brian Aldiss once said. what was that rhyme? SF's no good, they bellow till we're deaf. And if it's good, then it's not SF, that sort of thing. But one point he does make in the book, which I really like, which is a general point about culture, about when you find your last word on a subject or on a genre or a form or what have you. And he says for him, Stalker's like the last word on cinema. And he says you sort of find those last words by the time you're in your mid-30s latest, and you don't ever sort of go beyond that. And it reminded me of various things you encounter in life, you know, and you sort of, your tastes form and you discover things which blow you away, and you have your own icons, and they're never really replaced. Nothing else becomes the last word. There's no pavement here. I'm just going to show you now where I'm walking. So it is quite Zoner-esque, isn't it, in a way, you know, obviously very rustic. I don't think it's too far to the bookshop. It's quite some time since I've been out here. I'm trying to think how long it actually is. It may be 10 years, it may be longer. It's a good while, I must say. It can't be 20 years. But we'll see now. Okay, so here's the children's bookshop. Literally, as it says, just a few hundred yards outside the town. That's like an old toll or turnpike cottage. And there it is. And it's got the white rabbit on the outside. Isn't that great? Lovely. Good stuff. Well, that was a no. It was virtually impossible to get in there. There was a note on the door that said, push very hard, door swollen due to rain. And my God, you did. I virtually had to break it down. And then the bell rang, there's nobody there. And the lady came over from the house next door. And she's quite elderly. And she clearly has some breathing problems. She had a mini oxygen tank or something like that on her back. She had a look with me for the Silverbergs, which are on the website, which are mammoths, mastodons and man, puffin, and she couldn't find it. I found it, but it wasn't really in good nick. For £5 I wanted something a bit more minty than that. And the other one was a copy of Revolt on Alpha C, Silverberg's first novel, which in theory she had that as well, but there's no sign of it. And I think I know a dealer who's got a copy of that. I'm not desperate for it anyway. I'm kind of more interested in historical reasons, because in his autobiographical writings, I think it's in Yesterday's Tomorrows, he goes into great depth about how he wrote the story and the novel, and you see he really struggled with it. And when you think of somebody like that who's got such facility, think them struggling with anything even early in their career is astonishing, really. Okay, so I'm taking a break from SF here. I'm in Green Ink, which is a great little bookshop. It's really good for modern firsts, and we're going to look at some non-SF stuff. I've got these beautiful Patrick O'Briens here. Really great historical naval fiction, probably the best ever in that little subgenre. And I know somebody on the channel who I think calls himself Harry Flashman was talking to me the other day online on the community page about the time I met George MacDonald Fraser, and this was the book he was promoting when I met him, Flashman on the Mountain of Light. Absolutely beautiful, and these are such lovely books. And Collins Harville with the leopard there on the spine, you don't see that anymore. Absolutely gorgeous. And yeah, this is a great shop. I'm not really shopping for modern firsts at the moment, but I get very tempted in here. And there's The Sugar Who's Never Let Me Go in a first. Marvellous SF novel, of course. I was once on the way to giving a lecture in Swindon about SF, and I didn't want to go because I was reading that book and I couldn't put it down. And here's Borges, The Aleph in Cape. Very, very beautiful. I do love Borges. Let's just have a look at that because I'm very tempted by that. Good grief. I used to have a load of Borges in hardcover and I sold them on. I really shouldn't, but that's nice. Very nice. I do love Cape books, as anybody who watches the channel will know. And I just want to show you some more there, modern first. So we're just going to clamber up here and take a look. There's Auditor's first book, The Brightfount Diaries, which is based on his time as a bookseller. That was his first book. And here is an SF novel by Martin Amis, Time's Arrow, which has the same basic premise as Philip K. Dick's Counterclock World, which Martin would have read because he read lots of SF as a lad because his dad Kingsley was very keen. And there's some Atwood show. I'm not a massive Atwood fan, but this is really beautiful. Look at that, bodily harm in Cape. Look at that artwork. Absolutely gorgeous. Were I a fan, I would be all over that, but as I say, I'm not really. And there's Ballard, Dave Creation. I bought that when it first came out, and I've got a signed one, of course, from one of the times I met him. Alan Burns, Babel. Interesting writer. Did a book called Europe After the Rain. He's sort of on the edge, really, of SF. And I think some of them are back in print now, because the Calder list went to a small publisher when he died. And there's William Gibson's Spook Country there, which is a fantastic book. I have a complete collection of signed firsts by Gibson, and I'm a huge fan. I haven't really talked about him very much on the channel, which is odd really. And this is Hulebeck, and I've never read this one, and it is one of the more famous ones, but I do like Hulebeck. But I think the early works, each one's a different translator, and that tends to sort of make things a little bit inconsistent. So here we go. And here's another nice Ishiguro, Artist of the Floating World, which is a fantastic book. Ishiguro's a real master of the small things in life, which can mean an awful lot. And there's great sequences in this. The bits I remember the most were when little boy, the main character's grandson, is talking about Godzilla films, and Godzilla's never named, but that's what he's talking about. He's talking about Kaiju films, and it's really, really touching. I don't know what it is, but it's fantastic. Now, here's an interesting one. C.L. Cornbluth, The Mindworm, in Michael Joseph. Wow, let's have a look at this. £75, 1955. Bit of a leaning spine, but a very, very uncommon book. Beautiful to see. And Cornbluth, of course, died very young. I got that Ness for complete Cornbluth stories a while ago. That was really good. Primo Levi, Tom McCarthy. There's a copy of C, which was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. I actually found that unreadable, and I'm beginning to think that for me, he's a one-book author. I really like Remainder, and if you haven't read Remainder, you must, because it's fantastic. Really fantastic book. C is Noteboom, Arcane Nariad. These are all names that I know really well through selling them for years and years and years, because, you know, I do like my modern fiction as well as the speculative stuff, though I don't say speculative. Now, Ian Sinclair, Landor's Tower. This is a Sinclair I haven't read. I must take a look at this. Very, very nice. And this one is it's Welsh themes to it, so if I can just pull the front free end paper over, which I can't do. And that's £20 for a first. I think that's out of print actually. It's really nice. And there's Radon Daughters, third novel, which I didn't get on with. I loved the first two, Whitechapel Scarlet Tracings and Downriver. I read those when they first came out. So I moved that one on. And there's some Colin Wilson down here. I'm a bit of Colin Wilson nut, as you know, and this is one of my favourite novels. This is Wilson's first novel, Ritual in the Dark, which is a fantastic book. Absolutely love it. It's one of my favourite novels of all time. And then there's Man Without a Shadow, which is its sequel, also known as Sex Diary of an Existentialist, also known as Sex Diary of Gerard Storm, also known as, what's the other title? It has at least 3 or 4 titles, but Man Without a Shadow is the best title, the original title. And there's a magician in that who's based on Aleister Crowley, as every magician in 20th century British fiction seems to be based on Crowley, and he's called Caradoc Cunningham, which is a nice Cymric sounding name. And here's God of the Labyrinth, which is the third of the Storm trilogy, which again is a borderline SF novel, sort of time slip type things. And I don't have any of these 3 books in hardcover. I've read them many times. That's probably the weakest of the 3. But great stuff. And yeah, so if you're in Hay, do come and have a look at Green Ink, because I think at the moment they have, for me, the nicest broad range of modern firsts. Absolutely lovely, and thanks to the guys here for letting me film. So don't miss this out. I'm going to have a good rummage myself now. I got a bit overwhelmed in Richard Booth's. I think it's a combination of I didn't sleep that well last night. I've been feeling pretty tired anyway. Obviously I'm on holiday, trying to sort of catch up on relaxation, and had a few beers last night. And also I sort of felt sort of overwhelmed by, you know, the amount of SF books I've bought since starting the channel, doing these book hauls and what have you. And the thing is, you know, people like book hauls and you end up buying probably more than you would, and that's not essentially a good thing. So I sort of decided to pull back a bit, and I think I've kind of burned Hay down really. I've got a couple more shops to look at today, but I sort of very much feel that I've come to a point with it because I've been so much in the last year and a half or so. And as Alan, one of the subscribers on the channel who lives nearby, I should be meeting him later on for a drink, he was saying that, you know, you don't see a lot of new stuff coming in except at our demands. But I'll show you what I got. I went to Cinema Bookshop. I was there yesterday, went again today, because, you know, you look around and you want to try and sort of match condition and prices to books which are more common. And the anthologies thing has continued, and I decided to get this New Writings in SF 21. It's not 100%, it's got a bit of a rippled spine. This is one of the ones I don't have, but this was only £2, and there's 4 or 5 other copies around Hay, and I'm hoping to get a Sidgwick hardcover of this at some point. I think this is the first one the Sidgwick did as a hardcover, but it's proving quite difficult to track down. But, you know, so I thought I'd go with that because £2 is good. I also bought number 9, which you don't see very often, and this is still in a plastic bag, so I'm going to pull it out. So as you can see, I am on an anthologies kick, and it's very much making me feel that I want to pull away from novels. And it's too easy to buy lots of SF novels, you know, it really is. So that's that, and that was £3.50 from the Cinema Bookshop. And then I got a couple of Nebula Award anthologies, and this is in really beautiful condition. This is Nebula Award Stories 5, edited by James Blish. But of course it's a weird thing because, you know, the editor just picks from the winners as winners and shortlisted things. And this is a really good showcase for that year, which was, let me see, 69. And it's got A Boy and His Dog by Harlan Ellison, Passengers by Robert Silverberg, Time Considered as a Helix of Semi-Precious Stones by Delaney, and this story's by Sturgeon and Lagan in there. There's a 10-page essay by Darko Suvin, who is the guy really who provides a lot of the theoretical background for the things I do in my Elements of SF series. And it's his thinking which has really sort of helped me clarify my thinking about SF and what it is and what it isn't. And this is in really beautiful neck, so I thought I'd get that. It's a little bit spine faded, but it's really beautiful. And, you know, I've got most of these stories in other places, but to read this as a piece gives you a real feel for that year. And of course the Nebula is Science Fiction Writers of America, and it's what they were giving awards to, so that's really sort of nice anthology. And I also picked up, this was number 2, because of course the Nebula started in the early 60s, and this obviously is a few years previous, and this has got some great stuff in it. So this dates from, let's see, 1967, and Richard McKenna, who is a figure you don't hear a lot about. I've read all his SF stories. I'll have the one that's in here. And it's also got The Light of Other Days by Bob Shaw, which is part of Other Days, Other Eyes, and is a magnificent story. I know people are discovering Bob Shaw, and I'd probably do a Bob Shaw overview soon because he's underread in the sort of contemporary science fiction community, and he is really important and really good. And Light of Other Days is probably his best single piece, I would say. So if you pick that up, and pick up Other Days, Other Eyes, the novel that it's part of. It's got Day Million by Frederick Pohl, an R.A. Lafferty title, and The Last Castle by Jack Vance, and We Can Remember It For You Wholesale by Philip K. Dick, Man in His Time by Aldous, Call Him Lord by Gordon R. Dixon, one of his most important stories, because it's very minor figure Dixon really, and yeah, really, really great. So 2 nice sort of showcases for those years, and it shows you what was happening. In Richard Booth's, I didn't really buy anything. There's a lot of the same old in there. you know, you see certain books, certain authors, and you know, you can pick them up any time because they just, even with the stock, they're being depleted compared to what it was, and it's very cheap. It's just gone right down. It started to rain outside, and then I went across to Adiman's, and that was just a relief because even though Derek is more expensive than everybody else here, he does have the best books, and he's the most professional bookseller. And we had a good chat actually. He was telling me about how he went on a buying trip to Cwmtalery in Wales, and he said that it was a great buy, and he met Derek Taylor, the Beatles publicist, and how he spent a couple of hours talking to him, which was great. And we talked about how books can change your life, and how it's not books that change your life, it's you and your response to books that change them. So that was really great. And I picked up a few things there. I got this, a couple of pan lozenges, 100 Years of Science Fiction, book 1, edited by Damon Knight. This is kind of a historical anthology, and these had various covers over the years. There were 2 of them, and they basically, in hardcover, were one Gollancz hardcover, and he actually had that in stock. But I do like the lozenge, and this has got sort of, you know, historical stuff like Rudyard Kipling's With the Night Mail, which I really like, great story. Chris Neville, who you don't hear much about. J.H. Rosnier, French science fiction writer, and you know, he was somebody who was important in the sort of like scientific romance days, Sturgeon, and you know, other stuff as well. So it's really, really nice. So it's mostly sort of early part of the 20th century, and beautiful condition. I do love the pan lozenge, as you know. And I also got this, A. Van Vogt, Anarchistic Colossus. In hardcover, this was a Sidgwick Silver, late 70s. You normally see this in a real state, and this was beautiful, so I decided to get that. These were a few quid more than they would be elsewhere, but that's because Derek knows his game, which is fine. And he knocked money off me, knocked 10% off me, which is great, which he does now and again, which is fantastic. I also got this, The Mind Riders by Brian Stableford in Fontana, which has got a fantastic bit of artwork. And I just love Fontana books in this period, and I do like Stableford. This is a singleton. I'm not going to be a Stableford completist. I do like his work, but he's produced an awful lot, and as good as it is, you know, it's a big, big rabbit sort of hole to fall down. But that's really beautiful, and normally you see this in a state, so I got that as well. Something which I was kind of surprised by, and I had seen it before, and it's got cover art by Rodney Matthews, is this, In the Footsteps of the Abominable Snowman by Joseph Nesvadba. And if I pronounce that correctly, I'm sure I'm not, who is a Czech science fiction writer. It's got an introduction by Aldous, short stories. And, you know, I think this guy, he's in the sort of same tradition as Kafka, that East European fabulous thing that spills over into SF. It's in Russian SF as well. So that's really, really nice copy. And you see it now and again in a state, and this is beautiful, and it's NEL and absolutely lovely. So I thought I'll go for that, even though it was a little bit more than I'd normally pay, but really, really nice. And I wound it up really with a book which I just sort of want for the iconography. I'm not a huge fan of her writing, and it is in print from Tor as a trade paperback. And this is a book I used to sell back in the 80s. You don't see it much now. This is The Snow Queen by Joan D. Vange or Vinge or whatever. Who knows? And, you know, this was huge, and it's like a space opera take on the Hans Christian Andersen story, several sequels. And, you know, absolutely great cover there. Is that Peter Goodfellow? I'm not sure, but marvellous. The spine's a little bit faded and a little bit sort of, how can I put it? It's a little bit concave, but I kind of wanted to get this off my list. It's one of my nostalgia buys. So that's sort of the haul today so far. I'm just taking a break back in the cottage here now, and I think Mark and I are probably going to wander off to the children's bookshop because I've not been there for years. A couple more places to look at, and you know, it is good to be here and have time to really sort of spend time here. But you know, I'm getting a bit tired and a bit overwhelmed. I think really, you know, I wanted to talk a bit about my relationship with books and how your relationship with books changes as you get older. And I definitely feel that I want to bring things gradually to not a close, but to sort of slow down and stop acquiring so much. And, you know, maybe it's time for a video on why book hauls are bad for you, but I don't think people bought books the way that people do on YouTube these days. Years ago, these big book hauls, and you know, you sort of took things a bit more slowly and stuff. And it's very easy to end up surrounded by mounds of crap, you know. And it's not like if you're Matt at Book Pill, he sells them on and things. I sell stuff on as well. Funnily enough, I didn't bring anything to sell this time because I was coming over on the train, and it's not a great time of year to be selling, you know, late January. So I might come again in April or later in the year with Jules Bird and sell some stuff then, and maybe look at some other things, because I just tend to look at the SF here now. So it's 1:30. I need to look and find out where Mark is and just check my phone. So we'll see what else comes up on the vlog later on. Right. So
what I've learned from the Becky interview is don't fiddle your hat on.
Yeah. Yeah. He said I'm cold in this. This is why I missed out, because I didn't want to say, Chris, why are you wearing a hat? Because I always do a bit where you don't see the whole thing, because we always chat beforehand and then afterwards. So, but you know, it's one of those things. So, but we'll pretend this isn't running into it that way. So Alan, here we are. Good grief. Alan is one of the subscribers on the channel. Say hi, Alan. I just said we're going to pretend the camera's not on. We're doing it now, of course. And he's teasing me though, because what has he got here? Cassandra Nye. Do you know who Cassandra Nye is? Well, Cassandra Nye is Thomas M. Dish and John Sladek, we think, isn't it? I think it's both. Yeah? £4.
Yeah.
Paperback Library, world's leading publisher of Gothics. They've got Bodice written. Philip Jose Farmer did that Jane Austen one, didn't he?
Did he?
Late in his career. It's
Yeah.
called something like, it's got Pemberley or something in the title.
Oh, I know, yeah.
I've never ever seen it.
Yeah.
He's got Delaney and Hacker's Quark as well. Number 1. I think there were 4.
There were 4, yeah.
4 issues in
I've
this,
been
yeah.
searching everywhere for 2 and 4, but
Yeah, I mean these.
they don't come up very
This
often.
is the one you see the most.
Yeah.
I haven't seen those for a long time.
Yeah.
And there's great stuff in there.
There is.
So, fantastic. Yeah, that's good. That's really good. So there you go. So this is what happens with the Outlaw Bookseller as well. Meeting the subscribers. Cheers, Alan. Great
Cheers
to meet you.
indeed. Cheers.
And Alan bought me a Dave Hutchinson book a while ago. So you know, if you buy me a book, you know, you might get to meet me as well. How excited! I'm sure you can all come.
That's bribery.
Anyway, we leave you to it for now. We're going to get on with the drinking. Bye for now. Well, that's the Hay visit done. It's Thursday morning. It's just after 9 o'clock. And as you see, I have the shades on because it's the second sort of mild hangover in a row. Another great night at the pub last night, initially with Alan, one of the subscribers to the channel. It was great to meet Alan, and then with my regular friend Mark. And yesterday afternoon was a bit of a bust in terms of book buying, but it was handy because it made me realise that I've kind of burned the place down a bit, and I'm going to pull back a bit from book hauls and stuff this year. I do have a couple of visits to dealers coming up, but I'm going to require less this year and give myself more time. So I'm going to be editing this footage now and doing some more SF interviews soon. And you know, it's been a good trip and a necessary one, and it's good to sort of stay overnight in Hay. The first time I've stayed overnight here for 30 years. And you know, it's not what it was, as I always say, but it's still worth a visit. And if you want to know about this cottage where we stayed, you know, do ask, and I'll let you have a link, because the price is very reasonable. It's very clean, very well organised, everything's really easy, and it's sort of in town and what have you. And now I'm sort of just taking a breath before I get back. I'm going to take the video editor to the castle to have a look around, and she'll have a route around some of the shops and stuff, and then we'll get ourselves home. So thanks for watching. This is Stephen Andrews, Outlaw Bookseller, signing out for now. Please, you know, subscribe, like, comment, super thanks if you desire all that stuff. And I hope you enjoyed this, and there will be more book buying, as I say, but probably not as intense as it's been in the last year. Bye for now.